Hello, everybody. It's that time of year. It's March. It's officially March Madness. Well, actually, I don't know if March Madness begins until the tournament, but it's March Madness. It's me, your boy Prez, aka Hot Take Prez, aka more aggressive takes than Ja on social media. And I'm here with a very special guest. Not the first time he'll be here, not the last time he'll be here. It's none other than the Strickland's own contributor, writer, podcaster, Twitterer, coming to you from a different continent entirely. It's Stacy. How you doing?
Stacy Patton, I'm doing well. Usually I'm coming from another planet anyway, so
There we
thanks
go.
for having me on, Prez.
Yes, usually the planet of Connecticut. um, cool. So, yeah, we can get right into it. I mean, it's March. I'm behind on my scouting. I feel like I haven't watched as much as I want to watch about a lot of these prospects, but particularly in the 20 to 10 range. Um, but the good news is this is the time of year where I change Draft Strickland's format from once every 2 weeks to once every week in an attempt to catch up and do all of my homework at the last minute by taking advantage of people who know things and watch hoops, and generally I can just take their takes. And today the topic of conversation is one that is near and dear to my heart because it the genesis of this topic was one of the best draft things that I have read, and it was an article published by Stacy. What year was that? Was the Poku draft, right?
Yeah, that's been a minute.
Yeah,
That was like peak pandemic, I think.
yeah, the Poku draft, as everybody 100% absolutely calls that class. Um, so yeah, like 2020. That was 2020,
Yeah,
right? Am I tripping? All right,
yeah, 2020 draft.
2020, and it was a weird time to be a Knicks fan, right? Like we were beginning the Leon Rose era, and at the same time around the league, the offenses they didn't quite reach fifth gear like they have now, but you could tell teams were beginning to like maximize shot profiles and things really slowly. Not the Knicks, but other teams, and we already were kind of moving away from the old like Ryan Anderson, Steve Novak, Bruce Bowen, like 3-and-D specialist era, and kind of you could see hints that like tall players were learning how to dribble and pass and coming into the draft with shooting ability and things like that, which is why Poku was kind of the patron saint for this transition and for this article. But more importantly than that, this article kind of put together a rubric or a heuristic, whatever you want to call it, to look at power forwards or large basketball players with skills, however you want to call it, and whether they might be cool in theory or cool in actuality, or like what does it take to be a kind of power forward, big wing type, and really make it on a contender. But I'm not really doing it justice. So, Stacy, do you want to give the quick version of this thesis?
Yeah, the article was definitely not a quick version, for what it's worth. And I'm glad you enjoyed it because definitely informed by a lot of the discussions we've had. No, I mean, I think the basic premise was I looked at basically, I actually went all the way back to the 80s, when some of my editors, present couple included, at the Strickland were like, yeah, you don't need to go back to looking at Moses Malone, to look at what we need to talk about. But I looked at all the teams that made the finals going back to the 90s, and the fours on each team had certain traits. And I've made a case. I had a feeling for a while that power forward is actually, in many ways, the most important position, or a very important position that maybe everyone doesn't think about, particularly on defense. I think it's the second most important defensive position. This is actually a point of debate between me and Dallas Amico, who's a great guy to follow on Strickland. This is like kind of a running debate we've had because he argues it's the least important position on defense. But my point is, like, because of kind of just, it's six. Those guys can be anywhere from 6'7" to 6'10". Well, if I say 6'7", Prez is gonna not be happy about that. So I'll say they're 6'8" to 6'11", but they're kind of the median or a little bit higher than the median of the height in the NBA. So they are the kind of guys that can be tall and long enough to do big things, but they're but agile enough to do guard things. And when you have, because of that, if you take advantage of that, that you're going to have a guy like that out there and you get someone really versatile, it's like a force multiplier and it makes everyone else's jobs easier. I think the analogy I used was like kind of like a left tackle in football, where the left tackles, they're not the star in the same way that a quarterback is thought, but they make everyone's lives easier by doing a lot of things that aren't accounted for, right? So, if you have a four that can do things like protect the rim as a secondary rim protector, it allows your center to be more aggressive, right? If they can space the floor, it allows more space for your pick and roll game. So I had all these ideas. So if you go back, you can look at, I'm not going to go through every one the way I did, but if you look at the teams that have won titles, I think I did in 2020. So the Lakers had just won it with, I think they were about to win it with AD. 2019, who was it? 2019. Anyway, it was like a lot of the Cavs. The Cavs had Kevin Love. The Warriors teams obviously had Draymond. And before that, you had the Heat. Bosh played this kind of archetypal role. So I looked at all of going back, and then there's actually 4 traits that stood out to me. So there's 4 traits that I think are very important for a power forward. I probably think that there's a couple others that we can talk about later, but these are the main ones that if you look at that historical list, people have the criteria where they're elite at 2 of these or above average at 3. So you are elite at 2 of these skills, or I would say above average for NBA fours at 3 of them. So one of them is shooting. So just raw perimeter shooting. One of them is playmaking, right? So, and I think that's the one where I think me and you, Prez, have debated the most. But what does that mean exactly? Pau Gasol was a playmaker of one kind as a post playmaker. Draymond Green was a short roll playmaker, right? Can we count those as the same thing? I'm saying yes, because it kind of juices your offense, but it's in very different ways. But anyway, the ability to create shots for yourself and or others as playmaking. Team defense is the other one. So the ability to rotate, maybe switch on to perimeter players, have some defensive versatility. And then the last one I would say is rim protection. So secondary rim protection is very important. You've seen it from a guy like Chris Bosh, right? Chris Bosh also played the 5 for them, but his ability to not only, be a great help defender, but also, if they did have a center get pulled out, or if Miami trapped as they're wont to do, being able to clean up on the back end. Those kind of guys. So those are the 4 skills. So if you're elite at 2 of them, or above average at 3, every team that made the finals had a guy like that, with the exception, I believe, of the Heat in 2006. Because I don't know if you would call Antoine Walker that. But you can go through the list. Everyone on these finals teams, they had those guys. Even the Pistons were like the exception. A lot of these rules of thumb we have on championships, having unique stars. Rasheed Wallace, even before that, even at that time, was kind of the archetypal version of this.
Yeah, he
so
definitely
just give
is a great example.
Yeah. And so I realized this isn't the quick version, but just to give a couple examples, right? Like if you're going to be all offense, so Rasheed is one example of a guy who was above average at a bunch of things, right? He was an above average shooter for that time, above average rim protector. He's a good shot blocker, above average playmaker, I would say, and I would say elite team defender. But he was playing obviously in a great team defense too. But then let's say you're not let's say you're an offense only player, then you better be elite at those 2 offensive things I can think of, and that I mentioned, and that the example of that is Dirk, right? So Dirk nobody's confusing him with Hakeem Olajuwon, but or at least on defense, but obviously an elite shooter and an elite shot creator, especially for himself, and I actually think he's a pretty underrated passer too.
Really good passer.
Those are it's just not the first thing people mention when they talk about Dirk, but yeah. So anyway, I'll cut it off there. I talked for a while, but hopefully that gives you the breadth of it.
Yeah, and it was timely back at the beginning of the pandemic in the 2020 draft, and we talked about Poku a lot, and Poku was like a Rorschach image for draft Twitter. I mean, he's still like whatever, only 20 or 21, but um, because
Well,
he
I
had
think
the
been playing pretty well this year.
he has this is the first year I think where he's like a
Look like an NBA
plus,
player.
yeah, like a plus impact player, which whatever, he's like 20, right? Like I don't think it's behind schedule necessarily or anything. Um and yeah, he's the kind of player who had showed flashes of really good playmaking, shooting, rim protection, and team defense. So it was question was like, oh, he might have many paths to being good, whether it's being good at a lot of stuff or being really good at a few things or whatever. So what I was thinking before we get to the 2023 players in the class who might be worth looking at through this lens, through this rubric. I want to talk about some of the fours and power fours currently on contending teams, just to kind of walk through how this stuff works in reality. And I forgot to mention at the top, the whole reason, or not the whole reason, but one of the reasons we started looking at this also was because back in the day, in the pre-Julius Ascension days, it was like, okay, this seems like a need we should be considering, right? When every team has these impactful, rangy wings or mobile bigs or whatever, and the Knicks, we didn't know if Julius was the guy. We didn't know if Obi. Later, we would look at Obi through this lens, and it's like, okay, we don't know if he can be the guy. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. Um, so it has always been, along with point guard until this season, really one of the like, oh man, I wish the Knicks had a versatile four. And like when I started coming up with this draft topic, I was listing the different contending teams, and at the bottom I put Knicks for funsies after like all the contenders, but because I want to do a written version of this analysis, but I'm gonna take out the for funsies because they're fucking up people's couches, and they're as much of a contender. Maybe they're not a real contender, but they're as much as a contender as like Cleveland or Memphis or
Cleveland.
whatever. Like, like I don't think any of these teams are on the level of say like Philly or Milwaukee, but uh anyway, so let's start out real quick with Julius. So as a reminder, the categories are shooting, playmaking, rim protection, and team defense. I gave my guess. I don't think he's elite at any of those things, but he's pretty good at a lot of those things, right? So he's not a
All of them besides
40%.
rim protection.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I wrote down as well. Like his shooting is at the point where I'm comfortable saying he's definitely above average given the volume. Anybody who could bust out 8 threes on a given night, not
I
even if
think
it's not
average.
regular, yeah, like you're above average a shooter, and a lot of that
And
stuff
it
is
even
dribble.
makes me think that maybe it even makes me think that like if you have like I mean, I guess this is a tangent, but like you have 35% from three on 8 threes a game. Would you take that, or what was he during the pandemic? Like 41% on 5 attempts per game or something?
I
Which
did
one
a
would you
Twitter
rather
poll.
have?
I did a Twitter poll of this
Oh,
2 months ago. This exact Twitter poll, and it was pretty evenly split. And I think most people, I did a blind poll, so some people knew the numbers were Julius, but not everybody. And I think it was about split between people who wanted more accuracy, smaller volume, and people like me who preferred more threes, slightly less accuracy, just because you got to bomb away in today's NBA, man. Offenses are too crazy. Even if you're not hitting like 37%, like it's just really important for spacing and for getting up lots of shots.
and I think it does depend on the role.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, one, if you have Jalen Brunson on your team, yeah, I want you taking a lot of threes. And
Yeah.
two, and two, think about the shots he's not taking as a result, right? One, a
Right.
lot of those are shots where last year he was pump faking, dribbling into a contested. It's not just the fact that it's a 2 versus 3. It's also the fact that when you dribble in after that pump fake, like those were just really bad contested shots. Whereas a 3 is he's gonna have a little more room. It's probably gonna be more in rhythm, and yeah, I think, and as a result, if they have to come guard him out there, it opens up more drives, right? So you can see it. I think that's been a key driver of his shot distribution changing. And I think that's probably going to go in the modern NBA, to your point, for most players, right?
Yeah, it's just such a like team wide. You need to take so many threes to be offensively efficient these days, and with with non-shooting fives and with Jalen Brunson, who shoots a lot more threes than he used to, but still not a lot of threes, then it's incumbent on whoever is playing with Brunson and the bigs to hoist them up. So and they've talked about Fred Cass has talked to Julius and Tibbs, and they've said that's by design pretty much for a couple of years, like ratcheting up the volume from three. So real quick, let's go through some of these other teams. We mentioned Memphis, right, back in earlier in the pod. Jaren Jackson is the 4 there. I put him down as elite for rim protection and team defense. I mean, he's getting pretty rightful defensive player of the year buzz, I feel like, this year. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I wrote this article, I think it was like the year after, or a couple years out. He was a Luka draft. He is like one of the guys I would have had in mind as like the ideal. Which is, and by the way, like I think if you read that article, one thing I emphasize is it's not always the best player on the team, right? If it's Duncan or Nowitzki, that's one thing. But like a lot of these guys, like Robert Horry, for example, going way back, they're like role player types, but they fit these key needs, right? And that's kind of, I'm not saying Jaren Jackson's a role player, but in some ways he's like the star version of one, right? Because he's not the typical ISO guy. He's not a guy even you throw it into the post a ton, but he made an all-star game because of the impact and the number of things he can do. But yeah, I would say elite at both of those things for a power forward. I'll still put him as an above average shooter, but like
that's what I had.
Shooter.
Yeah, that's what I had.
Then,
I was like, not elite, but he's a good shooter.
And then he's not. I've never been too impressed. That was one thing at Michigan State. So full disclosure, to everyone, you can feel free to boo me. I had Jaren Jackson number 1 in my draft board in a class that included Luka Doncic. No, I do not think that's still the case. I did have Doncic too, but but that's just how high I was. But one thing was I also thought, and I think Prez, me and you have talked about it, I did not think he was used properly at all at Michigan State. And some of the flashes of off the bounce stuff he was allowed to do, I thought that there was more playmaking upside than he showed. For whatever reason, hasn't really come to fruition. But when you're as good at the other things as we mentioned, it doesn't matter as much. So
yeah, exactly. All right, so just sticking with the Western Conference, Draymond, you mentioned him before. He's the archetype for versatile 4, right? Like elite team defense, elite rim protection, and elite playmaking. I would say, even if he shoots like booty. The rubric says you need 2 elite skills. I'd say he has 3, which is why he is who he is, right? He's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, even though he doesn't have counting stats, just because he's so great at some of the things he do that don't always show up on the stat sheet.
Yeah. I mean that pretty much sums it up. Reason he's a 4-time champ.
Yeah. Moving along to the contending Kangs. You talked about Sabonis. This was actually kind of tricky for me. I think he's an elite playmaker for sure. I wasn't sure if he was elite at anything else, right? Like, I mean, he's not an elite rim protector. He's not a bad team defender. He's probably
but
solid,
he's even above average. I mean, the 4s, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of good 4 defenders, right?
Yeah. And then the other thing is like evaluating him by this rubric, I've said like it's just playmaking, and then he's now solid at team defense. He's still not a good shooter, and he's still not a good rim protector. But this gets at what you were saying before we started recording, which is one of the advantages that kind of isn't quite incorporated into this quick back of the napkin analysis is like some of these 4s can actually play the 5. And sure, some of them might be giving up something on defense in some ways by doing it, but if it makes the rest of your skills play up, then it's definitely like a little bonus thing. Like and he's a perfect example. I'm pretty sure I haven't checked Basketball Reference. A sub bonus, exactly. I'm pretty sure he's played the 5 more than he's played the 4 this year.
On Basketball Reference, he is listed as a center, which would have been my cheat to get out of it if I was really painted into a corner, and this was a heuristic I wanted to die on the hill with. But no, you're absolutely right. I think I do like my original thought was that one, I think historically there has been a little bit less like can you play small in a pinch hasn't been what turns a series. You know what I mean? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know that Sacramento can go all the way doing that with him playing center. I think the best example of that. Actually, yeah. How would you compare him to Prime Stoudemire? Because that's the guy who I think was really a 4, but was really effective at the 5 and worth that trade off, right?
Yeah, I mean they're way different, right? Like you
They're
look at
different
Amari.
players, but yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, like he's an example. He's also a good question for you in terms of like he was a really good shooter at a time when guys who were really good shooters didn't always shoot threes. So, uh,
Yeah, he
like on
was a
the
mini
Knicks,
king, but yeah, yeah.
and he could have probably easily extended his range. I mean, like his form looked fine. He just came up into the league a little too early for that.
The 1-3 I'll always remember didn't count. That's what sucks.
I know, I know. I remember where I was at a bar when I watched that shit. It was horseshit. Hopefully we smash on Boston again tomorrow. But yeah, I don't know. He's not a versatile 4, right? Like he wasn't a bad playmaker, but he definitely wasn't a good playmaker. And he provided decent help rim protection. He wasn't good at primary rim protection. I don't know if you would call him a elite help rim protector. I would say he's above average.
Yeah, I mean he
Team
had
defense, he was
some
awful.
team defense. He was like one of the. I mean, it was the poster child for if you didn't believe
Mm-hmm.
D'Antoni coached defense, the fact that he built
Mm-hmm.
his teams around Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire would be um, some arrows in your quiver. No, I mean I think I'm very curious to see what happens with this Kings team. We're gonna play them for the first. This is the first time this season, right? We haven't
I
played them
think
yet.
so.
I'm very curious to see how they go forward in the playoffs because I think they're going to have to like what are they going to play them at the 5 against Denver?
Who's the bonus?
Yeah.
They have to. What they gonna do? Put Keegan Murray on Jokic?
Well, I mean, no, I mean, I think you would go. I
Oh,
mean,
with
yeah,
him at the 4 and
Holmes,
like, yeah.
Holmes or something. Like that's can you win a championship with Sabonis at the 5 or like really playing heavy minutes with that lineup? Because then I don't know how. Like I don't know if I would. So that's where it gets a little tricky. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
And like
yeah.
because their power forward right now is listed as Harrison Barnes, who I think actually does fit that versatility metric right now. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say they don't have like traditional big power forwards. They have Barnes and Keegan, who
And Trey
you
Lyles.
and Trey Lyles and uh various other mid, but mostly those guys. And if you look
Don't
at
call
those
him
guys,
mid. You know who wants Trey Lyles on the Knicks?
Phil Jackson
Schwinn.
somewhere.
That's Phil Jackson somewhere too, but it's Schwinn Jackson too. So
I
we talked
forgot that
about
that was one
that
of
on pod.
Schwinn's brief, ill-fated agendas.
No, I
Nobody's
think
perfect
you brought it up on a
100% of the
pod
time.
recently. Like,
Why?
well, because this is a side note, but I would imagine you were of the opinion that Obi's probably going to get moved this offseason.
If not this offseason, at some point.
Yeah, like for all parties involved. So they're going to need someone to come in as a
I
backup
see.
for whether they draft one or it's a cheap vet. Ideally, you have one of each and let them duke it out. So in that case, Trey Lyles wouldn't be a bad. Like if you do get a
Yeah.
guy like um, either Chris Murray or Hendricks. Wow, sorry. If one of them competes with them. Anyway, that's a tangent. But yeah, I think the point is like if you're counting Barnes as their power forward, which is what Basketball Reference says, I think they fit that. And if you're counting Sabonis, I think that there's a whole other conversation that like should a fifth category here be the ability to play center? I'm still a little hesitant at that because how many people's ability to play both has changed like deep playoff series. Let's put it like that. I can think of one, but I'm gonna throw it to you first.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Sheed comes to mind. Although, they mostly had Ben out there. I do know sometimes they would have Sheed at the 5.
KG was who I thought of, but
KG and Power are the ones I'm thinking of. Because I know, some Bynum came and went for them. Yeah, that's true. I don't know.
Bosch played the
I
five
think,
a little bit.
yeah. I think it's sort of like an emerging thing that probably is more valuable now than it was back then. And the inverse is true as well. Like, we're now seeing some people who are normally fours play down if they're agile enough, right? Like Keegan, for example, he's pretty big. Lauri
Markkinen.
Markkinen is the example. Julius could, he doesn't, but he could. Um, there's a couple of small forwards throughout the league who are really just power forwards, right? Like the Clippers, like Kawhi, like he's
Kawhi's just a
basically playing the
beast.
four for them. Yeah, exactly. Durant, Aaron Gordon, a couple of the guys we're talking about now have been small forwards for most of their career. So just moving on along, we can talk about Kawhi pretty easily hits, I think, some of these categories when he's healthy, right? Like shooting, team defense, probably even rim protection.
Isn't he just
And
elite at all of those things and like decent as a
yeah,
playmaker?
yeah, exactly. Phoenix with KD is like the same thing. He's really good at shooting and team defense and probably playmaking and rim protection too. So like, he is what he is. Aaron Gordon is one I wanted to talk about. He's been the revelation for the Nuggets, despite Murray and MPJ. Gordon's probably been their second best player. I think he has elite team defense and
That's just
elite
because
rim
they didn't give
protection.
Bones enough minutes, man.
I know. R.I.P. Bones. I don't know what's gonna happen with him. It was free him, and now it's free him again. So we'll see what happens to Bones. Hopefully, he can outplay Russell Westbrook for some minutes next year. Assuming Russell Westbrook goes back to LA, which is not a given.
Yeah,
So Aaron
he might
Gordon,
go farther west, so. A lot farther west.
yeah, farther west or farther east by a lot. I don't know. How would you rate out Gordon?
That's a good question. I mean, he's definitely I don't know if I'd call him an elite rim protector. He's like really good. Like it's not going to show up in block numbers, but I would imagine his defensive field goal percentage stats are pretty good at the rim. Good team defender. Like he's like a decent shooter. I don't know. Like the thing is, the threshold for power forward shooting has gone up. He's shooting 38%
I think he's not above
from three.
average.
This year is 37.6% from three on 2.6 attempts per game. That's like, I don't know. That's like
no
Jeremy.
volume.
That's what Jeremy Grant used to do on the Nuggets, basically.
Yeah, I don't think he hits the volume, and it makes sense if you think about how he plays. Right, he's not just chilling on the 3-point line. He's like cutting and chilling in the dunker spot, and just lurking and doing big man stuff, which is the whole point, right? Like some power forwards who can't shoot can do other stuff to actually still make up for that, and that's what Aaron Gordon does
he's a good
on the
playmaker.
Nuggets. Yeah, he's a very good playmaker, and defensively,
So he's above average at.
No, go ahead. Yeah, he's above average at, I would say, team defense, playmaking, and rim protection. If not elite at least one of those things. The Nuggets are at their best defensively when Jokic is not in drop because he's really big and has good hands, and when he's like at the level and all that, that means there's more responsibility on dudes like AG and sadly Michael Porter Jr. to help out on the back line. So yeah, I don't think he's like a Jaren level, Mobley level monster at the rim, but maybe like right below that. So definitely above average. So
And I would,
that's a good look.
consider those guys elite protectors. Yeah.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like those are the two hallmark, along with like Giannis. Those are the very clear like elite rim protector power forwards to me. Speaking of those two guys, so Mobley, even though he's like 12 years old still, I would put elite team defense and rim protection, below average perimeter shooting, and below average playmaking. But I mean, you're already 19, 20, and you're elite at two things. And maybe not below average. You're right. You're right. I'm probably hating. But he's probably average.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's especially when you look, he can create his own shot pretty effectively out of the post. Like, I think I would count that as part of playmaking. But if you want to call him not an above average offensive player for like that's the thing. Like I think he is an above average offensive player for a
He
forward.
is.
Right?
He is. You're right.
So
You're right.
I'd probably give him above average playmaking, and then that shot is booty right now. But as the article said, you only need to be elite at two of those things, and he is elite at the two defensive aspects. So
Yeah, and if you, like you said, if you include making plays for yourself as part of playmaking, then I think it's totally. He's pretty good at from the mid range.
he's
I
not a
think
bad
this
passer.
season.
You look
No, and
at
he's
his
like,
assist turnover; it's 2.7 to 2.0. So
yeah, exactly, and he's still not quite as efficient as you would want him to be from outside of the restricted area in terms of mid range shots. I thought he would be a little better from there. So, but and again, he's 19 or 20 or whatever. So like, it's only good things going forward for him. Giannis is another like textbook case study,
who's
like
that
elite
guy?
team defense, elite rim protection. I'd say elite playmaking. So like very easy. Everybody knows like,
Horrible
oh, he
shooting, but
doesn't
who
shoot and
cares?
he does everything else like MVP.
I mean, And side note, that is the worst
Yeah.
possible matchup for the Knicks, right?
Oh yeah. 100%. No team in the East puts fear in my heart except for the Bucks, who put all the fear in my heart because I'm like, they could just throw Drew on
Yeah.
Brunson, fucking Giannis and Brook on Drew, and just make pain for
And
everyone
on
else.
offense, like Mitch has gotten so good, but like I still don't want him having to guard a stretch five. Like that is just tough on our defense. Like even though he's gotten better at doing that, but then he's just not in the paint and it's tough.
Yeah, and Tibbs, this would not. You don't want to see us facing a team that Tibbs would have to do stuff that we haven't done before. So like schematically, like we don't want to experiment. Most of the other teams, I think we can get by just doing what we've done. But if we played the Bucks with their shooting, it's just like we need to try new shit, which we're not really well versed in. Speaking of teams like the Sixers, who are really good but don't put any fear in my heart. This is the most fascinating one to me, because therefore is Tobias, but I put
He's not
them
an elite
as
shooter.
even I would say he's in a pretty elite shooter. He's pretty good, but I don't think he's good at all the other things on this list.
So you think he's elite at that and not even? Let's see. Is he shooting 40% from three? Like he always shoots well against us. So 38% from three on 4.5 attempts per game. That's borderline elite. I'll give that to you just for the position.
Yeah, he should be shooting more threes than he is taking. So like I definitely get that.
You don't like his playmaking?
And
I think he's a reasonably good connective passer, and like he's like when he's not forcing stuff.
Yeah, I guess he's not bad, but I've never been like, oh, Tobias Harris making plays for himself, except for like the occasional pull-ups.
Well, he doesn't turn the ball over. He can create some shots for himself. He can drive, and like he's a pretty solid passer. Like for like, I mean, if you have fours around the league, there's guys who can't really, who are just like PJ Tucker, right? That might be the worst one, but on those standards, like I think I would put him probably above average playmaking. And I'm not really into his defense, though. That's, I guess, the thing. Like his defense is very, very meh.
And then it's also interesting because it's one of those extra nuances because his playmaking might be all right, but he doesn't do that on this version of the Sixers, right? With Maxey, Harden, and Embiid. Like those guys are making all the plays for themselves and the others. It's not a coincidence.
Somebody wrote it. I think it might have been like Dave Early, but somebody wrote an article about like his role is just kind of weird on this team, and
yeah, he's probably got a little more in the tank in terms of playmaking, which you want for the playoffs, right? Because he's gonna have to tap into that if they're gonna win. So better to have it and not use it than need it and not have it. But he's definitely like a borderline case.
Yeah, and I'll add, I do fear the Sixers more than like the Celtics, for example, just because I feel like Embiid and Harden are two problems we don't really have good answers for. So yeah,
I'll take my chances with them trying. That would be a hilarious series because Embiid and Harden, and then the Knicks collectively very much rely on free throws, which the spigot turns down a little bit in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see how that
The
affects
showmanship
both the teams. Yeah. The
between
last team,
Quickly and Brunson and Harden, you'll have how many head jerks will you have, right? Just
I
throwing your
know
head
it'll
back
be.
like,
Look, man, don't even let us fuck around and trade for Embiid in the future, because then every other team is going to be so mad at what the Knicks do from the free throw line.
And then you of course have the Magneto versus Xavier of coaching matchups. Doc Rivers
It's true.
against Tom Thibodeau.
I know. I think that's one of the few coaching matchups that I actually like for us. I've seen
Yeah.
Doc. Maybe it's just because we haven't been in the playoffs as much as Doc, but I've seen Doc fumble the ball a little bit over the last couple of years. The last team on here of the current contenders or quasi contenders or whatever is Boston. Tatum is their power forward, right? I know like Horford gets a lot of minutes at that power forward, but I mean we could do like both of them really. I know Horford starts for them at power forward, and their closing lineup, it really depends on who they're playing, whether Horford's in along with Rob Will or whether they slide Horford out and play Tatum. If you evaluate Tatum, clearly an elite shooter, clearly an elite team defender, and probably above average playmaker, and
Doesn't really give you rim
even
protection.
he doesn't like not give you rim protection, but he's not like the other guys we talked about.
Yeah, I mean that's when you play a small forward at the four, like you're sacrificing
Right.
on something, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, exactly. You're relying on his team defense to make up for that. And then if they're in Horford mode, he might be a fucking elite shooter for a four now. Honestly, like as stupid as that sounds, because his shot diet
not a
is
very aesthetic
really
shot.
it's not very aesthetically pleasing, and most of them are way open and catch and shoot, but the guy's shooting 45 from three.
But he's another version of this play, going back to when he was in Atlanta, really. Like he is this like that article. This is that kind of player, right? Where he does everything pretty much at a pretty high level.
Yeah. And, that's what I was gonna get at. Like he's, even if he's not even if he's only a nominal starter, like I think it's inarguable that compared to other starting power forwards, he's probably an above average shooter, an above average playmaker, an above average team protector, and an above average rim protector. Even now, even at like 50 years old.
Yeah. You're 36. He's what I'll also add is this, kind of going back to Tatum a little bit. So one thing I didn't mention in that article that a lot of power forwards traditionally we think of as doing is rebounding. I did not mention that as one of the skills. And specifically as it comes to the Knicks, right? Tatum is a solid rebounder. If he has to keep Julius Randle off the offensive glass for 7 games, that puts this theory to the test, right? And I guess my question to you would be, do you think that maybe that article or in general it's undervaluing rebounding as part of it?
I mean, you can kind of cheat and just like update it and by folding in rebounding into team defense, because that is kind of part of team defense, right? Is ending the possession. So if I was the author of this article and I wanted to die on this hill still, that's what I would do.
I think I'd rather go with the opinion. Well, yeah, and also like the thing is, how many people are good rim protectors but bad rebounders? Jaren Jackson Jr. is the weird one, but usually, like to your point, if you're good at team defense and you're good at rim protection, you probably know how to box out. You're probably athletic enough to get rebounds. So, and if you're not too like if you're too skinny to like box out, you're probably not going to be a great team defender, right? So. But that's the thing. Tatum kind of does those things, so I think he's an interesting case there, and I'll be interesting to see if and when Boston goes small. Because that's how the Knicks have built their team, right? Offensive rebounding in the age of small balls.
I mean, we'll see tomorrow, right? Because Robert Williams is out, so like they pretty much have to go small. Right? It's tonight. It's Sunday. I thought tonight it was Monday. I don't. Let me see. I don't watch games live on the win streak. It's been working, so I'm not going to change it up. So I kind of lost track.
Yeah, it's tonight for you.
Oh yeah,
it's 7 hours, 6.5 hours.
Shit. All right, I'm gonna watch that. Then I'm gonna watch Last of Us. So we're good. We're good this evening. Um. Okay. Yeah.
It's
Yeah. It is
technically
interesting.
tomorrow for
So
me. So
you'll see it tomorrow.
yeah.
What is time? Man-made construct. Okay. Enough about current contenders. This is draft fucking Strickland, and we got to talk about draft prospects. So, bringing this full circle, the reason why this topic has always been of particular interest to us is because even now, with Julius in like God mode and clearly satisfying the rubric, right? It would still, I think everybody who's a Knicks fan would still acknowledge that it would be useful to have a versatile large wing of some sort on the Knicks bench, right? Like Obi is very talented, but I don't know if he's versatile. And Josh Hart plays like a big wing, but isn't a big wing. So we're kind of like making do with what we have. Not just making do, flourishing, right? I shouldn't undersell it here. But if you ask lots of different Knicks fans who care about the draft, including you, Stacy, I think it'd be fair to say that, while you want to take the best player available, we seem to have a lot of guard minutes already gobbled up going forward, right? With Brunson and IQ going nowhere and Grimes presumably going nowhere unless he gets included in the superstar deal. That's 3 of the 4 guard minute slots pretty much gone. So, which brings us another tangent, actually, that I know you wanted to talk about, which is the idea of, does a prospect need lots of minutes to develop or not? I know we kind of split on this, and it's almost a 2-part question because on the one hand, I think that most prospects need some sort of playing time, even if it's not a lot, to develop. There's a question of like, okay, what if you get a really young prospect and that playing time is in the G League, right? Does that count? So there's definitely sort of ways around that. I think my view on that mostly comes from just there doesn't seem to be many players around the league who kind of just didn't play earlier in their career and then poof turned really good. It's like Ant Simons and a couple other players, but it seems like the exception to me, although I haven't really looked at it. So, when you're Walt Perrin and you're looking at guys who you can draft, you're going to have pretty much one slot on your roster for a rookie. Maybe they'll play a lot, maybe they won't, depending on injuries and position and versatility and stuff like that. We know this Knicks team likes to take guys who are ready to play as opposed to projects. So there's kind of that layer on
Except
top
for
of
Trevor
that.
Keels.
Except for Trevor Keels. I mean, our first round picks or our fake first round picks, like with Deuce, where it was like
Our
basically a
58th
first
pick.
round pick. Yeah, exactly. Or our 58th pick. So we know our pick is probably going to be in the 15 to 20 range, depending on how much Dallas sucks. Fuck them. So we'll definitely have a chance in this draft to get a player like this if we want. This draft it tends to be more wingy, I think, than prior. There's not as many guards, even though one of your favorites, Jordan Hawkins, is often mocked to us, and he's a guard, which I'd be totally fine with for the record. I wanted to talk about some of the power forwards and big wings here, just because maybe some of them have that versatility, and if they don't have it now, maybe they can develop it in the future. So we can start at the very top with somebody who we are almost certainly not going to draft because we won't pick high enough, and that's Mr. Walker out of Houston, the 240-pound wrecking ball in defense.
Wait, isn't there another power forward at the top of the draft?
Oh, Wemby, yeah, I guess technically he'd
I mean,
probably
what
play
is
a
he
lot
a
of
power
power.
forward?
I mean,
He's
he'll
center.
probably play more power forward in his rookie year if I had to guess. So,
What if they do the Lowry marketing thing with him?
if I was his coach, I would be trying all types of stupid shit, bro.
Yeah.
You could do all. This is the one time I endorse all the Stacy like positions don't matter. Like play. You have Wemby. Fuck it. Play him as shooting guard, bro. Play him at the 2
Yo,
next
what
to
if he goes
Lauri
to the Magic?
Markkanen.
Yeah, or if he
Yeah.
goes to the Magic and they play like a Franz, Wemby, Bol, fucking all the 6'10" guys.
They would do it. It'd be fire, and it'd be fire.
You know
Franz
what
at
I
the
wanted
1.
to see when like in the midst of the process. This is what I always argued the Sixers could do because they were a fucking joke anyway at that time, right? I wanted them. They had Nerlens Noel. They had Embiid. They had Ben. I don't know if they had. They had like Okafor. They had Dario Saric. They had like 5, 6, 10 guys, and maybe Simmons was one of them. But I was just like, just throw them all out there. Your spacing is gonna suck, but like you just have a million guys who like if those guys get driven on, you're gonna block shots at the rim. You're probably gonna lose a million games, but like just try some shit, like instead, like they were like, oh, we took 3 centers in a row. We can't, we don't have a place for Nerlens Noel, Okafor, and Embiid. Like what do positions matter when you're trusting the process, right? But that's just my little rant. It clearly did it work out for them? I don't know, but I wish they had done that at some point.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I am very heartened to see some teams like Orlando take that approach successfully ish. I mean, depending on how you define that. Their problem is they don't have shooting. It's not like their big lineups work on defense. They just don't work on offense. That's the funny part. It's not like untenable
I
on
forgot about
defense at all.
Fuck.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's who I forgot. Yeah,
Wemby at the 3, Paolo at the 4, Wendell at the 5, Franz at the 1, Bol at the 2. Make it happen.
Yeah, and not this is not a knock on Markelle Fultz, by the way, but who's been awesome and I think should be a part of their plans going forward. But yeah, it'd be fun to see, and I mean, just like Franz and Wemby playing defense together could be fucking insane. Like,
yeah, they're one of those teams that like if they jump up, I'll be like the basketball fan in me will be like, wow, this is going to be an amazing thing to witness as a fan. I'm great that, after having so many lottery pick whiffs, some their fault, others not their fault. Like, I'm happy that they have this generational talent, but then the hater in me.
But they also got Shaq and Dwight Howard.
Exactly, they got Shaq and Dwight Howard and fucking Penny, and they got
Penny was also a result of the number 1 pick, right? Because they took C-Web and traded. Yeah.
So basically 3 number 1 picks or number 1 pick equivalents, fumbled the bag around Dwight many times, and just it's their own fault. They took Mario Hezonja and all that shit.
Fumbling Shaq was just one of the most legendary blunders. Like, I don't know if you ever watched the documentary on that. There's been several documentaries. Like a lot of people just take it as a foregone conclusion. Shaq could have gone to LA, but like they probably could have kept him, and they were just too cheap.
Yeah,
how you fumble shit, Shaquille O'Neal, I don't know.
It's historic talent, and then, they're in the East, so fuck them, right? So that's the other reason. So anyway, lots of teams could benefit from Wemby, but we're not here to talk about Wemby. I'm gonna put an asterisk on him. Jarvis Walker, he's pretty much another like poster child for this sort of thing, right? Like he doesn't score a ton of points, even though he's not a non-scorer, and he's literally just good at everything. Like he's as a prospect, he's a probably I don't know if you would for a 4. He's at this point, would you say he's an above average shooter? Like that percentage is getting up there.
I would I wouldn't project him as one just because he's not a great free throw shooter. It's not a high volume, but I think he's like in the 60s. His stroke looks clean. He's got a floater, which I like a lot. I think in time he could get there. I'm like bullish on the shooting long term. He will not enter as one. I do think he has more scoring talent than I think maybe people would say. I think he plays a smaller role because, to an extent that was a little bit true of Grimes, right? Grimes was mostly just a shooter at Houston, partly because, his skill set kind of played to that, but also, we've seen that he has a little more talent off the dribble than he was able to show at Houston. They're just they're a balanced team, and kudos to Kelvin Sampson. He's done an amazing job there, especially after, personally, I think he was dealt a pretty raw hand at Indiana. But going back to Jure, so I think he has the makings of an elite team defender. Like, what a really
I think he's already one. I think after Wemby, and even arguably including Wemby, he's basically the best defender in the class. Like he's
going to be able to guard guys Wemby will struggle with a little bit, right? At least at first. So
he could probably guard everybody, and his team defense is like he's a young freshman, and he already is like processing the game like he's not a Mobley level defensive prospect just because Mobley is taller, but I would say he's like right below that as a defensive prospect.
Yeah. So that's elite in 2 defensive skills, and I think he's a pretty good passer. I would call him an above average playmaker. I really like him off the short roll stuff. So I
Yeah.
mean, the thing is, I think I talked about this in this article as well. There's so many different pathways, right? If he just
Mm-hmm.
becomes like this elite defender, like a Draymond, he seems a little bit of a nicer. Well, I don't want to say nicer guy, not to call Draymond, but I'm going to say like I don't know if he's kind of got that level of just insane personality as Draymond, but that type of a player, right? Like a elite defender who like can play a connective role on offense. Maybe doesn't space the floor as well as you'd like, but is so smart that he still adds value on offense. Or maybe like the defense doesn't quite get there, but he gets good enough at a bunch of things on offense. Maybe can shoot the 3 a little bit that he becomes a PJ Tucker like player. He has multiple avenues, and we talked about this. Comparing guys like Patrick Williams or Poku to a guy like Obi Toppin, where and I would talk about this like Obi. I think I've become more bullish on Obi since the draft, but I do think if he wants to play a serious role in a contender, I do think he like I don't see him being above average at anything on defense. It's sad to say. Maybe he could get to like above average secondary rim protection, kind of like what you're talking about with Stoudemire. Like, and he tries really hard, but I think he'll need to hit elite offensive outcomes as a shooter and a playmaker, which it's not impossible for him. It's just the odds aren't great. But guys like Patrick Williams and Poku had those multiple pathways, and I think Jarace is a guy like that where there's just a lot of here's a real quick aside. How would you compare him to a guy like Patrick Williams as a prospect? Both young freshmen, both kind of similar body types. Patrick Williams maybe a little bit more athletic, but
Yeah, Patrick Williams is much more athletic, but I think Jarace is way ahead as a playmaker and way ahead as a shooter, and probably ahead as a team defender and rim protector. Pat Will was very good at those two things, but like I said, I think Jarace is like a top end team defender in particular, where Pat Will was like good for his age, kind of. So, yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. Jarace, poster child for he's another one who would be really funny if like the Magic got him and how they fit him. What happens when you have a team of only versatile fours? But real quick, I want to keep us moving because we do
and then you
have
have skinny fours. You have skinny fours, and then you have the 2 thick guys and WCJ
exactly.
and Jarace. Sorry, go ahead.
R.I.P. Jonathan Isaac. Yeah, the next guy on my list here is somebody else you're a big fan of, Noah Clowney.
Sorry, can I
is
interject for 1 second? There's one other.
yeah,
This probably won't take long.
yeah.
Do you think, so given especially we talked about with Kawhi, Tatum, guys playing up, do you think it's worth evaluating, and we don't have to do this on this pod, do you think teams will be evaluating guys like the Thompson twins, especially the Thompson twins, for their ability to play the 4, especially since the shooting doesn't look like it's a sure thing for either of them?
I think it'll be like for teams that like being more positionless, I think they'll definitely consider like, oh, this person can defend up and down, including all the way to the 4 potentially if they get stronger. So they jump high enough that they're fucking great rim protectors. So yeah, I could see it.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's. I'm definitely going to keep an eye on that, and I think that would add a lot to their case if you bought that they could play the 4 one day, because it probably lessens some of the shooting concerns, and it allows you to do more with them on defense rather than like I do think like because you can use them as a free safety from the 4 as opposed to just a wing stopper, right? And that's what makes Giannis could be a great wing stopper if you want it, but that's not how they use him to get the most value. So it definitely be interesting to see.
Exactly. Yeah. So back to the 23 class, Noah Clowney, one of the youngest players in the class. How would you evaluate him according to this rubric?
If I had to bet on a guy not being picked by the Knicks, it probably would be Noah Clowney. That's not to say I wouldn't want him on the Knicks, but he's a guy who's it's a lot more potential than product at the moment. I would say, I think like he's again a guy with a lot of these pathways. But in terms of actuality, I don't think I can call him an elite rim protector yet. I'm close. I think I'm close to calling him an elite team defender, but he won't walk into the NBA on day one being one. But I think he has the makings of like a super switchable guy, not like in the Jaren Jackson Jr. mold. But right now, like Jaren Jackson Jr. was a 40% 3-point shooter in college. Clowney takes a lot, and I think this is an interesting question I throw to you. How much do you weigh, that volume versus the results? Because I know like you're a bigger fan of volume, but when you're shooting 26% from three, volume only goes so far, and he's only a 64% free throw shooter. I'm not in love with the playmaking, especially compared to some of the other guys. So I think there's a lot of pathways. I think his easiest pathway is to be like an elite defender on both of those things, and then just get to like league average in three. So I don't think he has as many pathways as a guy like Jarris Walker. But if you buy the shot, there's something to be said about just how rare it is to have a guy who can protect the rim and shoot. It opens up so many things for your team, and that's the one thing the Knicks don't have. There's two things that you mentioned. You mentioned the long rangey wing thing, but they also don't really have a stretch big or somebody who can protect the rim and shoot at the same time. Randall has given them a stretch big in a sense, but he can't protect the rim, right? So I think that skill set is what's going to be valuable. But in terms of Clowney, like I probably prefer a couple of the guys I presume you want to talk about to him, just because there's I'm not like I can't bet on his shot yet. I can bet on him being a good defender. I don't know if I can bet on him being an elite defender, and I can't bet on the playmaking yet. But he's also super young, and there's going to be physical gains that'll help as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good overview of Clowney, and his age means that the fact that he can't, even if he has less pathways than Jarris, he still has a lot of pathways, right? And he's an archetype that we don't have, and because he's 18, like on the one hand, he probably wouldn't get a lot of minutes immediately on a team like the Knicks, but maybe they're okay with that since they will probably have their rotation set and he can just do like a red shirt rookie year almost or something like that. So, if the Knicks stick with their guns of contribute now type Brooks, then they probably won't take him. But if they decide to flip it and have somebody do an understudy year, then maybe they take someone like him. The next guy I want to talk about is another fast riser, hot name, another freshman, Taylor Hendricks on University of Central Florida. He's listed at like 6'8", 6'9", but every time I look at him, he looks bigger. Maybe it's because the fro. I don't know. His best skill is definitely his shooting and his rim protection. He's got some Jaren in him as a prospect. How do you evaluate him as a versatile four?
Yeah, of the realistic players the Knicks can get in this draft, he is by far my top choice. As I mentioned, I think not that I want to get rid of Obi. I love watching Obi Toppin play, but I would imagine he wants to go somewhere and get minutes. I would imagine the backup four position is going to open up. So it fits the need, and he fits that article. Like, just first of all, I think he's an elite shooting prospect. Is that fair to say? I know you have a high bar for shooting, but I don't think that's
he's up there. He's up there. I think in any other draft, he'd probably be one of the best shooters. This draft just has a lot of crazy shooters.
And especially how many 6'9", 6'10"? I mean, Brandon Miller, I guess, but Brandon Miller can't play the four, right? So he's a 42% 3-point shooter on 4.6 attempts per game, which comes out to 8.2 3-point attempts per 100, which for those keeping score at home is the same 3-point attempt rate as Emmanuel Quickly in his sophomore year at Kentucky. So the guy gets these threes up at a pretty significant volume, especially for a four. Averages 1.7 blocks per game. He's a decent playmaker. I wouldn't call him above average yet, but there's enough there. Like he's not like a does nothing off the bounce guy. We've talked.
He's not destined to be a black hole.
Yeah, but like I think you were also worried about his ability to like do anything besides straight line attack and close out. Have you kind of gotten a little more optimistic there?
Not really, but also he's a freshman and he's not an old freshman, so like it's one of those things that's a yellow flag. But I just kind of don't care because he's really good at other stuff, and maybe he gets good at that later. That's fine.
I mean, if all he turns into all I understand. If his shooting indicators, I think, are elite for that position. I don't know too many fours who had these kind of shooting indicators. and he's an elite shot blocker for that position. Like, how much does it matter if he does the other stuff?
I mean, it can work, right? Like there's high end 3-and-D players who still kind of stink at putting the ball on the ground. Like OG Anunoby comes to mind. Like he's actually shoots worse on drives than RJ Barrett, despite driving a fraction of the amount of time. And he's not a particularly good passer. But everybody's still trying to trade for this motherfucker. So clearly, I know he mostly plays the three these days. I think what the problem is, it kind of limits your role a lot. Like you're pretty much destined to be no more than the third or fourth most important player if you can't put it on the deck, which is fine, especially if you're a high end role player. It's just like in this NBA, you really need to, if teams hard make you put it on the deck, you got to be able to do something. But he's such a good shooter that if the bar is like, can he develop into somebody who can take a one dribble pull up or like one dribble and then a Euro step? Yeah, he'll probably do that. So I'm not super worried.
Yeah, and you can do a lot of creative things with him. I think gives you lineup flexibility. I mean, that's the guy I want realistic. I mean, I don't know if you'd agree, but that's who I want of the realistic options for the Knicks.
Yeah, it'd be great. The Mox got him going higher, so he might be out of our range. All right, I want to fly through a couple of more guys. Those are like the higher end ones, I think. There's a couple of other fours that I want to do like quick hitter style before we wrap up and get out of here. The next is, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch him, but he's a really odd player as a prospect because he's older and he just started playing basketball in the middle of high school. Naquan Tomlin on Kansas State. He's a starter. He starts at the 4 on one of the best teams in the country, but he is older. Like I said, 22. Compare that with someone like Clowney, who's 18. What is Clowney going to be like in 3.5 years, right? Probably a fucking monster. So from that perspective, Tomlin isn't really like scoring a lot or anything. Have you had a chance to look at him or Kansas State at all?
I watched them play Kansas. They had a really great late game finish. I have a buddy who's a big Knicks fan, but also a pretty huge Kansas Jayhawks fan. So I watched that. There's a lot to like about him. I think Kansas State in general is a fun team. He's an older prospect. I didn't know the backstory too much about um, when he
Mm-hmm.
started. But so when did he start playing basketball?
I think in like the middle of high school.
He's from Harlem. Um,
He's from Harlem. He had a growth spurt, which is why he despite being 6'10", he has some pretty shocking handle displays and flashes and stuff like that. And he moves extremely well. Um and like you said, he's from Harlem, which is, it's not part of the rubric, but
yeah,
also always pretty cool.
yeah, and I mean, good free throw shooter, takes threes, doesn't really hit them. I actually liked his form when I saw it. I was surprised when I looked at his percentages.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are the kind like that is. I think he's definitely a second round guy. I would love to send him to Westchester. The Knicks have done a good job developing players who come in with some tools and are willing to put in the work. He's a good advanced stats guy, right? Good steal rate, block rate, BPM. He does little and those are usually like the guys who are new to basketball.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I would look at because like that's usually a guy who like might have some physical gifts, but can he help you win a game? Well, he's playing a pretty significant role on one of the best teams in the country, and he's one of the bigger contributors to that by doing a lot of the little things that don't necessarily jump off the stat sheet. Definitely a great guy to take a second round flyer on, put him in Westchester, and check back in a year or two. Especially if if
Yeah.
they don't decide to take one in the first round, like a 4, and they go like Darius. I don't know if they'd go for Darius Arch, but that type of a player at the 4, and then or if they keep Obi, then you're like let this guy marinate a bit. And I think for him to be playing at this level, starting so late, I would imagine is a pretty crazy work ethic. So that sounds like the kind of guy that's a little bit like Rudy Gobert, right? So Perrin would be interested, I think.
Yeah, he's very interesting. It'll As much as I would love to first round him, I think he's too much risk as a 22-year-old, but somebody will take a swing. The last three guys I want to go through real quick. Uh, the first one is Gigi Jackson, who's had a precipitous fall down mocks. He's also by far the youngest prospect this year. Um, all the flashes, almost entirely theoretical. He's almost like Poku in the sense that I'm like, he could be good at a lot of these things, but like he actually isn't. But he has the movement skills to do that, but he hasn't actually done it. So I don't even know what to make of him anymore.
Yeah, he's a really fascinating, weird player. Sorry, not a weird player. Like he's super talented. It just isn't resulting in obviously showing up in terms of wins. Um, and I think in our group chat, I think it was Arya who mentioned this, Arya Chawla. But essentially, he was asking like, how many? So I'll throw the question to you on here. And shout out Arya if you're listening. Definitely not trying to steal your thunder or anything. But he was asking, and I think it was about Gigi. Um, you know, if you're like, how many like elite wing scorers are there that are whack passers?
Um, elite? I guess it depends how
Yeah,
you define elite, but most of
because
them
he was
can
saying
just
like a guy like Karis LeVert wouldn't qualify, for example, right? So like, because he said I think originally scorers who like are whack passers, and someone said Karis, and he's like, no, I mean like a BI type or like a Tatum type or something.
yeah, I mean, once you're that level of scorer, then it just becomes so easy to pass the minimum bar of proficiency by just using your gravity, right? If you're a tier below that, when you're talking about like Prime Harrison Barnes or Terry Rozier or Kelly Oubre or whatever, then it's just like, okay, you're just somebody who takes a lot of shots, or RJ, right? Who takes a lot of shots but doesn't really pass that much. So,
Or
but
Beasley,
it,
right? I
yeah,
think Michael Beasley is like the archetypal, like he could get a bucket whenever he wanted, but obviously never developed that part of his game. But
yeah.
would you
So
have called Michael Beasley an elite scorer?
I mean, as a prospect, absolutely. Not in the NBA, but so yet with Gigi, it's like I don't think he's good at any of the things right now, which is kind of damning as a prospect. But I think he could be.
Which
I
is kind
like
of,
his
I feel a
form.
little bit like that about Clowney too. That's kind of what I was saying too, right? Besides, well, he's a good
Yeah,
defender, I guess.
Clowney's actually a good defender right now. I don't think Gigi's. He's had flashes, but I don't think he's consistently a good defender right now. So it's just really rough. But it wouldn't be crazy to see him in 2 years become a good team defender, rim protector, playmaker, or shooter. So he's kind of just his own weird category here. Maybe we could
How
come
much do
back
you
to
think
him
like
in.
his team being asked
It's definitely part of it.
plays into that? And there seems to be some friction with the coach. I definitely don't want to be like one of those scouts who said, "Are there character issues or something?" I don't know whose fault it is, but it could be the coach's fault, or it could be that he's not being put in the best position. I think that's a whole. So one thing is I'll say is that I'm tempted to say it feels a little like Tari Eason, except Tari Eason was efficient and like did contribute a ton to wins on both ends of the floor. Like, yes, he had got in foul trouble, but he was a high impact defender, right? So I don't think that's a fair comp. But kind of going back to like the assist thing, right? So I think assist rate is something a lot of scouts will look at just to judge feel of the game. And feel for the game also impacts whether you become an elite scorer. So if you're a bad passer in college, sure, you can, like, if you're good enough at scoring, it'll open up easier windows in the pros. But do you think that if you're a bad passer, if you lack that feel, one, does that apply to Gigi? And two, if it does, do you think that makes you reevaluate his scoring outcome? Because you need to you need more than just scoring ability. You also need like to be able to read your you still need to know everything that's going on the floor to be an elite scorer, right? And if there's indications that you might not have that, how do you kind of think about it that way?
I definitely view it as a yellow flag, and we see it with RJ, right? Like since he is a prospect, he's like, oh, in theory, he should be able to leverage his ability to dominate the ball and score and drive to pass, and that's been purely theoretical for his entire career because of feel. So, I do think it's one of those things like you alluded to earlier. If you're not an elite scorer, then yeah, you can't be have whack feel, or else your playmaking is really gonna suffer. So that's definitely something I'm worried about with Gigi. I don't think the Knicks will take him just because he's not a kind of player the Knicks take, but um he's definitely gonna probably. I'm not even gonna pretend to know where the fuck he's gonna get drafted, man. He's just like a mystery. I could see him going 10th. I could see him going 30th, and neither outcome would surprise me. Um, The last two guys I want to talk about are both much more win now-y kind of contributors who can join a team as a rookie and probably help out. One of them is older, one of them is a little younger. The first is Kyle Filipowski from Duke, who is one of my favorite prospects just because he's really unique. Like if you run statistical queries about him, there's just not a lot of players like him, guys who launch a lot of threes, get a lot of steals and blocks, don't really protect the rim, have crazy high usage, and rebound like insane person. So he's somebody who I don't know where his like prime NBA skills, how good he'll be, but I could see a version of him that is solid at team defense, playmaking, and perimeter shooting. But I could also see versions of him that are just like good shooter and not great at anything else. So there's him, and then the last guy is Chris Murray, who twin of Keegan, also 22 years old, like Naquan, but much, much, much more polished. And like Keegan, can probably slide between the 3 and the 4. A big scorer for Iowa, but not quite on the level that Keegan was. So what do you think of Flip and Chris?
Yeah, so I'll start with Flip. So there's two things. One, just on Tankathon, Chris Murray is mocked 17th. Flip is mocked 18th, which is currently the pick the Knicks would get from the Mavs. The first question I ask you is, do you think he's a power forward at the next level? Can he guard
Flip?
fours?
Flip, yeah. I think Flip can guard for us.
You think he has the speed, the foot speed to guard fours and to do like the perimeter stuff?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. And then if I say these two names, and I promise I could not think of non-white players. I'm sorry. So these are the two that came to mind, with kind of the like the 3-point shooting, the event generation on defense, and the rebounding. Josh McRoberts and Moritz Wagner. How would you compare him as a prospect to those? Or in McRoberts' case, wasn't familiar with him as a prospect, but I watched him a lot in the league. That's who I compared Wagner to, who I did watch a lot as a prospect, and who at least flipped from a statistical standpoint, like those skills at least. I think that combination is similar to McRoberts a little bit.
I think there's definitely some similarities. McRoberts, I forgot about him. He was a really good playmaking prospect. He was an exceptional passer. Um, he didn't really shoot like that just because of the era, right? Like Flip, his 3-point percentage kind of stinks, but I think he's going to be a really good shooter, mostly on hunt, based on hunch than statistics. He takes a shit ton of threes, even if he doesn't make them. And then Mo Wagner, I think, has some similarities in that like he moves pretty well. He can shoot. He can put it on the deck. He can rebound. Another guy who actually came to mind oddly is like later career Robert Covington for me, because
Okay.
Covington has a much longer wingspan, but they both are really good. They both have really good hands. Like Flip gets a fucking ton of steals and deflections, and can guard in space a little bit, even if he can't really protect the rim. And Covington for a long time was an impact god just by taking lots of threes and just getting lots of stocks and deflections and being a really good team defender. So if Flip can like amp up his team defense a little bit, I think there's definitely a pathway to being really plus impact there. But if he ends up on a team like Charlotte and they're not going to coach him on defense, then I would not bet on that. But if he was drafted by like Miami or some
The
shit, then
Knicks.
I'd be like, oh, this fucking guy. Yeah, or even the Knicks. Like, he's probably a little big for this archetype for me. I'd rather air on someone more wingy, but I could see why he would appeal to this front office. He's young, but not the youngest. He can probably he's not afraid of putting it on the deck. He has good impact metrics.
He's from a big
So
program, which it seems like
from a big
matters to them. Or like,
program, yeah,
the other
and same
the other
and
thing.
same.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and same thing with Chris, right? Like they could plug him in. Big. Well, I guess Iowa's not like a big program, but like they could plug him in. He's not really a pull-up shooter or anything like that, but he's a really solid team defender. He's an okay rim protector, not like Keegan, and he's an okay above average shooter. So I kind of put both of them in this category of like slightly underwhelming, but definitely talented and
Yeah,
versatile.
I'm adequately whelmed, I would say, actually.
I'm whelmed.
In no, I mean, I think both of them. So I think both of them. It's fair to say both of these would kind of end up in the a variety of above average skills more than the two elite skills bucket, right here. It's fair to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually think, kind of on a meta level, the Knicks have favored prospects like that, right? Quickly
Hmm.
was that guy who had a lot of outs, I think, right? I think Quickly had the outs of like, can he amp up his, is the free throw rate an indicator that he can amp up his on ball and interior scoring? Ended up being a very resounding yes, more than anyone could have imagined, right? But he also had the shooting. Can he be a shooting specialist and with his length guard ones and twos and be an off the bench shooting specialist? Is he kind of a glue guy type like he was in Kentucky? There were multiple outs there, right? Grimes, same thing. He could have been just a 3-and-D specialist. They would have been okay with it. But then, there's the playmaking. So I think like on a broader level, they like guys who have, these multiple pathways to success with like a high floor, but then with like, so I think with Flip, at worst, like he's a rotation big who can, come in, space the floor a little bit, eat up 6 fouls, right? And maybe give you some hustle plays, right? And then if you look at the polish and the skill, there's some upside there. And I think with Chris Murray, it's the same thing. And that was what was so good about Keegan as a prospect, where there really isn't too many. They just check so many boxes, right? The only thing you don't have is like elite creation. That I think that was a bigger question with Keegan. That was a bigger question with Keegan because where he's being mocked was top 5, top 10, and it's like, yeah, but those guys you really like him to at least have the chance to be a number one option. Um, but so Chris Murray is more in the range where you're like, I don't really care about that, right? The guy can shoot at a very high level. He impacts winning in a number of ways. Can create events. He can guard the 4. He can guard the 3. He can probably play in a pinch at the 5. And you probably wouldn't agree with that, but I think Sacramento has done that with his brother a little bit. I think that will matter a little bit to the next front office too, and probably to a lot of teams. When I think NBA bloodlines probably matter more than people like to admit, and when someone literally has the exact same genes as you, they're having a lot of success, and you have a really similar game, I think that matters to scouts probably more than we think. And in Chris's case, I think you've mentioned doesn't have quite the like shot making of Keegan and the versatility, but he's still shooting 40% from 3 and he's 6'8". So it's not like he's going to be, for the most part, they both have high releases, so they're going to be contest agnostic. Like it's just hard to see this guy not being like a pretty good rotation player, can start, can be like a heavy bench guy for like 10 years, and can fit into a variety of lineups. And those are the kinds of guys the Knicks have liked. And, Tyrese has mentioned this a lot. Tyrese has said Chris Murray is like the Walt Perrin pick for this draft. And in many ways, do you feel like it feels boring to me, especially if there's guys who we could, like if Hendricks could potentially be an option, or even Flip, who might be a little bit more upsidey. But, at the end of the day, if you're picking 17th and you get a guy who can be a very reliable backup to Julius, as we go forward and take that step to contender, even if it is just the Obi role of 15 minutes a game, if you have a guy that's on a rookie deal that can like not make you hold your breath every time Julius Randle has to leave the game, but you're like, okay, he's going to come in and do fine and give Randle a rest. That's a pretty valuable skill set to have. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It would definitely be a boring pick. I'd be like, ugh, but he's a hooper. He knows what he's doing out there. Cool. All right. So this was awesome. And I'm gonna turn this and what we've covered into an article for massive plagiarism / easy product creation for the Strickland. So thank you for outlining a piece on a pod. I think some people prefer reading this stuff. Some people prefer listening to it. So now they'll have either option. We'll
Just
see
make
who
sure
the
it
Knicks
doesn't end
pick.
up in ChatGPT-3's training data. So
In who?
better you than ChatGPT-3 taking my stuff. So.
Did that happen?
Well, they train it on like publicly available text data, right?
So somewhere out there, somebody's like, AI, show me versatile power forwards and an analysis of it. And
that is actually, I do want to see if you could create, like, if you just took everything on draft Twitter and like everything that's written about the draft, can you like train a model or like a train? Can you feed it to that model and train it and get it to like predict who's going to be good?
We got
But
to see if any of the money coming in from the Strickland merch, if we could set some of it aside for this very important experiment. I'm gonna start advocating with the powers that be.
So, guys, if you want to see this, please subscribe to the Patreon. We go over all the tiers every time. So, yeah, if you want to see me build Morpheus for the draft, then no, not Morpheus, Agent Smith for the draft, I should say.
If you don't subscribe, we can't build it. Or Stacy, not me. Stacy, do you want to quickly tell the people where they can find you and plug anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find all my work on the Strickland. I host Pod Strickland, the Monday ones with Schwinn, so the ones that are neither a Schwinn solo nor Prez here. And I also host the Believe Knicks pod with Matt Miranda, which we're dropping another episode. Should have dropped today, or it'll be dropping very shortly. So be on the lookout for that.
All right, you heard him. Stacy Patton at Stacy Patton 89, king of the positionless versatile prospects. Go subscribe or not subscribe. Go follow him on Twitter and stay tuned to more pod Stricklands to get more Stacy and more draft Stricklands to get more Stacy because he'll definitely be back. Listeners, thank you. Enjoy your March Madness. I'm not making a bracket, so it's not going to be stressful for me. But if you're making a bracket, good for you. I hope you don't get too stressed about it. May I humbly suggest that you put the money that you would put towards brackets towards subscription to the Strickland Patreon or towards Strickland merchandise. I promise you'll be happier. And on that note, we will see you next week.